The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. That very day, the first day of the week, 2 of Jesus' disciples were going to a village 7 miles from Jerusalem called Emmaus, and they were conversing about all the things that had occurred. And it happened that while they were conversing and debating, Jesus himself drew near and walked with them. But their eyes were prevented from recognizing him. He asked them, "What are you discussing as you walk along?" They stopped, looking downcast. One of them, named Cleopas, said to him in reply, "Are you the only visitor to Jerusalem who does not know of the things that have taken place in these days?" He replied to them, "What sort of things?" They said to him, "The things that happened to Jesus the Nazarene, who was a prophet mighty in deed and word before God and all the people. How our chief priests and rulers both handed him over to a sentence of death and crucified him. But we were hoping that he would be the one to redeem Israel. And besides all this, it is now the 3rd day since this took place." Some women from our group, however, have astounded us. They were at the tomb early in the morning and did not find his body. They came back and reported that they had indeed seen a vision of angels who announced that he was alive. Then some of those with us went to the tomb and found things just as the women had described, but him they did not see. And he said to them, "Oh, how foolish you are! How slow of heart to believe all that the prophets spoke. Was it not necessary that the Christ should suffer these things and enter into his glory?" Then beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them what referred to him in all the scriptures. As they approached the village to which they were going, he gave the impression that he was going on farther. But they urged him, "Stay with us, for it is nearly evening and the day is almost over." So he went in to stay with them. And it happened that, while he was with them at table, he took bread, said the blessing, broke it, and gave it to them. With that, their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, but he vanished from their sight. Then they said to each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he spoke to us on the way and opened the scriptures to us?" So they set out at once and returned to Jerusalem, where they found gathered together the 11 and those with them who were saying, "The Lord has truly been raised and has appeared to Simon." Then the 2 recounted what had taken place on the way and how he was made known to them in the breaking of bread. The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. Today's homily makes sense in just about every context except the one we are in right now, with this time of social distancing. Today's message is about Pope Francis's emphasis on the art of accompaniment. Accompaniment means to walk with, to draw near to, and to live in close proximity of. To walk with, to draw near to live in close proximity with. So remember it now and apply it later. Throughout much of our history, Pope Francis believes that the Church has been really good at telling people what to do, but hasn't been so good on actually walking with them through life, the ups and downs. In his mind, we have preferred to stay at a distance from the messiness of life. This is reflected in our doctrines, which emphasize aspects like purity, separation, and personal holiness, to the exclusion of things like involvement, connection, and community. To reverse this trend, Pope Francis has advocated for what we might call social nearness. Telling the story of the two disciples on their road from Jerusalem to Emmaus, our gospel this weekend states, "And it happened that while they were conversing and debating, Jesus himself drew near and walked with them." In this one sentence, we have the art of accompaniment. The risen Lord drew near and walked with. Quite simply, Pope Francis is calling us to the art of accompaniment because that is what Jesus did, both before and after his resurrection. In his document, The Joy of the Gospel, Pope Francis writes a little bit more about this art of accompaniment. To accompany others, first of all, means to non-judgmentally support them. Non-judgmental support. This involves approaching others with a profound sense of respect, even if we disagree with them or think that they are out of line. He writes, "One who accompanies others has to realize that each person's situation before God and their life in grace are mysteries which no one can fully know from without. There isn't a one-size-fits-all approach to spirituality and life. To be clear, this does not mean that we affirm people at all costs. Accompaniment is not a form of therapy that supports others in their self-absorption, for example," he says. Rather, non-judgmental support is the ability to create a human connection before all else. Accompaniment also requires listening. Listening, Pope Francis says, is more than just hearing. He goes on, "Listening and communication is an openness of the heart, which makes possible that closeness without which genuine spiritual encounter cannot occur. Listening helps us to find the right gesture and word which shows that we are more than simply bystanders. One of the fruits of listening is that it prevents us from dominating the conversation. Notice that in the gospel story today, Jesus didn't just jump into telling the two disciples about the scriptures and how they related to him. But first, he allowed a dialogue to begin and even asked them questions. What are you discussing as you walk along? What sort of things? Was it not necessary that the Christ should suffer these things and enter into his glory? The ability to ask questions demonstrates an ability to listen. Finally, accompaniment means that we don't abandon others, especially when times get tough, that we stick with them along the way. Pope Francis writes, "The pace of this accompaniment must be steady and reassuring, reflecting our closeness and our compassionate gaze, which also heals and liberates and encourages growth in the Christian life." It is a long journey of patience and progress that isn't ended until we reach our destination. So our point for reflection this weekend on the gospel is that as members of the church, we are called to accompany each other on the path of life. That is what we are as Christians, accompaniers of each other and of our world on this path of life. A question for reflection today: who can I accompany on their path through life? Who are the people that I can accompany on their path through life? We might also ask ourselves, who are the people that accompany me on my journey, on my walk, on my path of life? We accompany each other not because we have all the answers or know exactly where we are going. We accompany others because life is simply too hard to go through alone.